Welcome to Inside the Numbers with the People's Pundit. I'm your host, Rich Barris, the People's Pundit. Don't forget, if you like the videos, to like them, share them far and wide, send them out to the far beyond, and let's get this channel boosted. All right, smash the like button. Don't forget, of course, the best place to follow us is on Locals, peoplespundit.locals.com. peoplespundit.locals.com. All right, before we roll into, we got a couple of videos. One I got to grab actually still, but I got two others that I can, while we're doing this, I can roll with that. But before we get started with this, it gets a little bit annoying that we have to hear this. It's not even annoying. It comes with the territory. It comes with the job, I guess. It really does. But I mean, I don't know how many times we have to do the same dance over and over again, guys. I don't know about you, but my feet are starting to hurt a little bit. You know what I'm saying? I have polled Florida more accurately than any pollster since I've come on the scene. And I eventually will get Florida wrong. Everybody gets something wrong at some point. Nobody is going to be right 100%. But considering the track record, especially against others like St. Pete and others, when I come out with a Trump plus 13 in the state of Florida, it's a big effing deal. It means Trump is up by 13 in the state of Florida. And I don't know why anybody would question it. Because we're not on RCP yet? Fingers crossed on that. But we are on Decision Desk. And because we're that very first poll. And we're going to look at it in a second. That very first one of what will be more to come that shows that Trump really does have a lead that big in the state of Florida. And that's what today is about. Sunbelt polling, right? From the Sunbelt is, of course, bottom part of, we'll just throw North Carolina in there, even though traditionally in the old, and he's right here, Kevin Phillips definition, the Sunbelt's really only part of North Carolina, and then strolls all the way across to the west and all the way to California, the suburbs of Ventura, the suburbs of Los Angeles, which Ventura is really outside of that, the Orange County suburbs, all the way out to there. And it was a big part of his thesis, which we just got done reading that book in the book club for locals. If you're a YouTube member or a locals supporter, you can join our book club and you'll know more about, which is great. But many haven't, many don't. So that's what we're doing it for. Anyway, obviously includes Florida, Texas, Arizona, and even parts of Nevada, if you're doing more of an expanded definition. And the Sunbelt polling has been pretty awful. And there could be myriad reasons for this. And there are myriad reasons for it. Some people are just bent in their views and they don't want to change on how they poll. And they have, resisted evolution. They've resisted being innovative. They've resisted ingenuity in a changing environment. And they keep getting things wrong over and over again, day in, day out. And they just, I don't know, I guess think that eventually something's going to pop off. They're going to be the one out of 20 outlier that's going to be right. I don't know what they're thinking. I can't jump in somebody else's head and tell them what to think. St. Pete is one of them, repeatedly understating Republican support in their own state in Florida. But there's something else going on here. And there's a lot of reading today. There's going to be a lot of video clips from one person specifically. And then there's going to be a lot of reading because you have to understand it in its full context. All right. And we can't do that. And I'm not telling you to take what we're going to read as total gospel, but trends do matter. Trends absolutely matter. All right. So let me just get the rest of this one. The economy. That one's the economy. Right. Okay. So as we throw these up and go through them one by one, I think you're going to have to take into consideration everything I'm going to try to talk about. I know it's going to be a bit of a pain in the butt, but first things first, I guess let's take a look at the new poll results. Okay, a lot of red on RCP, with the exception of this poll out in California, which I don't know what anybody would have expected, but California does appear to be trending to the right. We'll see whether or not that margin goes back to normal. But as of right now, Biden is running at least 10 points below where he was. Interesting tidbit. California was one of only a handful of states that voted more for Trump in 2020 than it did in 2016. And why would that be? It's a big part of the topic of the show today because this new realignment that we're always discussing. Here's the thing, though, about realignments, they're not really new, they don't occur overnight. There's always a sign of them somewhere, and then it gives the impression that something changed overnight. Bam! But that's not really how it works. How it works is you will see that trend and that realignment, chip and chip and chip and chip and chip, and then there's a cascading effect. And it gives this false impression that all of a sudden the suburbs trended Democrat. All of a sudden, Democrats became godless. All of a sudden, black voters became 100% was monolithically Democrat. That's not how it went. And for those out there who don't think, as I responded to somebody yesterday on Twitter, if you don't think that eventually non-whites are going to start voting more Republican, then you just don't know much about realignments and how this works. If pre-civil rights era, you would have told somebody that blacks would be voting monolithically for Democrats for 30, 40 years, they would have laughed at you. Laughed at you. But over time, stopping with Richard Nixon, obviously, the civil rights era solidified views. Nixon was the last to do around double-digit share, around close to 20% of the vote, and for a Republican presidential candidate. And then in 2020, Donald Trump did the best with non-whites that any Republican presidential candidate had done since Richard Nixon. And so there have been signs of these things going little by little. Let's just pop this up a little bit closer real quick before we get into some of the specifics. And again, I'm going to roll a video, and a couple of them, and I'm going to intermittently interrupt with some of these videos, and then we're going to talk more in depth. And again, some boring reading. I'm going to skip along this press release from this group. They do a tracker for identification, and you may already know where I'm going with this, but obviously, Texas, Trump versus Biden, Trump +9. That's actually more Trumpy. And that's Signal. Signal also did North Carolina, and for some reason, it's not on here yet, which is very important. They have Robinson up. High Point has Robinson down by a few. They have Robinson up by a few. I think it's like 4. Quinnipiac, no shocker, is way out there. Way out there. They do have Trump leading, but they have Stein leading Robinson by like 8 with some really crazy numbers. And we're going to look at that poll specifically and really about the presidential race. And it's a good example of why polls in North Carolina and in Florida have been, and others, and a lot of these Sunbelt polls have been so wrong for so long until myself, and I believe it was Signal, properly and accurately polled the 2022 North Carolina Senate race where Ted Budd won. North Carolina had not been polled properly in over a decade. I mean, the polls were grossly wrong. Biden was leading in North Carolina. Hillary Clinton was leading in North Carolina. Cunningham was leading Tillis by enormous margins with some of these polls, the Quinnipiac poll, the Marist poll. Go and look at how badly they polled that governor's race. They had Cunningham ahead by 15 points or more in some of these polls. It was outrageous. They overstated the Democratic margin by over 10 points. What do you think that does to fundraising, by the way? When the Marist poll comes out, or the Quinnipiac poll comes out, and has you getting drummed by 16 points, if you're DeForest, can you raise money? It's a little difficult. Now, nobody believed it, but it's like, well, maybe he's not down that much. But geez, that's a lot to make up. That's a waste of money. Some of this, I do believe, is 100% sinister, and 100% they're doing it to help Democrats. Others is a realignment issue. Changing demographics due to state migration, of course, international immigration, legal and illegal. And when you're in the middle of a period like that, it's difficult. Part of it is your methodology. If you're using the census as a baseline, for instance, before you begin to implement your other weights, you will have a problem in the state of North Carolina. Absolutely. If you're using the census instead of the voter file or an AI or machine learning model of the voter file, you will absolutely get North Carolina incorrectly, which is what has happened for over 10 years. The new census just came out. Everybody in the state knows that they grossly undercounted the Northeast, the Central East, and the Southeast, along with some parts to the rural western part of the state. That is catastrophic for a pollster if they're using the census as a baseline. That is catastrophic. And guess what? You're going to see that in the Quinnipiac poll. And in fact, let's do it right now. I will show you real quick because then we can get rid of the Quinnipiac poll. I just want to bring this up and show you this. The governor's race is +8, for Trump on upside of a too close to call race. They do have him up, but forget about this. Let's moving along. Here we go. The head-to-head Trump versus Biden. 4-year white college degree, no college degree. This is about the margin Biden had with college-educated whites in North Carolina in 2020. So there is actually, it's a little bit of a slide for both Trump and Biden, but Biden is just a hair below where he was. Trump is a little bit less than where he was, but either way, the state of North Carolina is only 35% educated in the electorate. 65% will not have a college degree. When you're talking about white voters who do not have a college degree, it is a majority of the electorate. White voters who have a college degree are less than 30%. And we could just round up and call it 30%. But you will blow North Carolina if you have a margin like this and your weights are off. This is a gross loss of support for Joe Biden among white voters who do not have a college degree. That is a 12-point decline for Joe Biden and a 7-point increase for Donald Trump. If Donald Trump wins, whites who do not have a college degree in the state of North Carolina, 67-29, he will win North Carolina by a lot more than 2 points. In fact, it's likely to look more like 2016. North Carolina resisted, let's remember this, even as the country shifted to Democrats from 16 to 18, North Carolina shifted by about the same amount, but resisted the overperformance by Democrats in the Electoral College, like we saw with other Electoral College states. Okay? In other words, it shifted actually a little bit less than its PVI. Come 2022, everyone talked about the red wave in Florida. They didn't talk about the red wave in North Carolina, where Bud fairly easily dispatched Sherry Beasley, a solid Democratic candidate, African-American. She was far more liberal than most of the candidates they try to put up statewide races, but they did it. They passed her off successfully as a moderate, as they need to do in order to win the state of North Carolina. And guess what? She still got beat. Republicans won both statewide races for the state Supreme Court and supermajorities in the legislature. Cooper was not up for re-election. Had he been, he would have lost. But he snuck through in 2020 when it looked like it was going to be a more difficult environment for Republicans. So again, while many people focus hard on Florida and the red wave, they ignored North Carolina, where Trump has been polling. If we look at the Hill Decision Desk average, where Trump has been polling significantly better than you would expect him to poll. And we'll do that in a second. I just want to bring up before we can come back and revisit some of the internals of these polls. I really want to get to the boring reading part of the realignment, though, before we do, so it makes a little bit more sense. I have a couple of clips that I want to play, and one of them, it highlights a specific voter you would never have thought would be a Trump voter or somebody who's leaning to voting to Donald Trump. And I think it lends credence to, even if this tracking poll, all right, with identification is off a little bit, even if it is too liberal, too Republican, whatever it may be. It's the trend that matters, and we're seeing anecdotes that certainly support the whatever scientifically gathered data on this. But let's play this first, and we'll come back to it.
Who do you think in office, both in terms of their presidencies and in the next presidency, who would keep America safer? Who would do a better job of keeping America safe? Raise your hand if you think President Biden would do a better job of keeping America safe. President Biden. Oh, Omar. Okay. And hand down Omar. And raise your hand if you think President Trump would do a better job of keeping us safe. All right. So that's everybody else except Kim. You think it's a tie?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Tanisha, explain why you think President Trump would do a better job of keeping America safe around the world.
Well, because he's all for America. I know people may have their opinions about him, but he's all for,
Michigan.
building America, making America better, helping businesses. He's a businessman. He was a businessman before he became president. So he knows how to make more money and build up our country. So I'm kind of on the fence about him, but as far as his business aspect, I think that will help to keep us safer.
Yeah, that's an absolute, that's absolutely huge, demographically, which we're going to look at in a second here. Demographically, that does not look like a voter who would normally be considering Donald Trump. We know Joe Biden has a major problem in that community. When it comes to Michigan, he seems to have tried to capitulate to the anti-Israeli wing of his party in order to appeal to voters like her, and yet it doesn't seem that that's really the reason she's that's not really what is. It's not the sum total of her vote, what is making up her mind about who she's going to vote for. And you're going to hear more about that in other clips. But all right, first and foremost, I'm going to interrupt with some of these clips as we go through this. All right, so give me 1 second here. And let's just the hell with the Quinnipiac. We can get rid of the Quinnipiac. Again, the point being, Quinnipiac, again, I don't want to harp on it, but point being, with the Quinnipiac poll that we were looking at, that's very clear that if Trump had a margin like that with those voters, it would be a much bigger win than what they're suggesting it would be in that poll. So very clearly, that's a methodological issue. And I did notice they were self-identified registered voters, which tells me, again, they're using the census. Why? Because if they're not, let's say they're using an online panel, they're not doing what's called deduping or matching to the voter file. So they're obviously using the American Community Survey or the larger census survey to begin their weights, which they typically do. That's what they do. If they're using phone interviews, then very clearly, if they're self-identified registered voters, they are not using a voter file as a source. Again, this has been something we've been talking about for many, many years, going back to the blunder of 16, even before that in 2014, when we first went public with some of these changes. It was and I know it's very dark in here, I know. But it was a very, very heated topic of debate back then. You would think that it would be ironed out by now, considering some of the mistakes, but it's not. And forget about, I mean, we're focusing on the Sun Belt today, but look, the Sun Belt and the Rust Belt have some serious polling challenges. And the fact of the matter is, a lot of people have moved to the Sun Belt, which is state to state migration, have come from the Midwest and the Northeast. I mean, they come from everywhere, but if you're not going to be able to reach and pull them while they're in that region of the country, when they move, it's going to further complicate whether or not you're going to be able to accurately survey them in different, very quickly changing demographic states like that. All right. Boring reading time, but it's important. All right. And I'm going to interrupt and just try to keep it entertaining by going through some of these clips that we have because I think they're very insightful. I think Mark did a really good job. We were talking about, I think it was on Gorka or Rob Schmidt a couple of months ago. Mark and I were talking about these changes. And here you can see in the Pew Research, they do a tracking poll to look at whether or not, one party has an edge over another. And what we found, or what they found this year, is very much in line with what we have found and what others are trying to say, which is it is a very divided nation still. When you when you actually lean independence, this is a little bit different than what we have found, but it's more like 9%. 9 to 12%. They found only 3. And I suspect that's because they're 100% live caller and they are going to miss a lot of low propensity voters. I'm sorry, Pew, but you do. That's why when you do poll actual races, you tend not to be that accurate. But with your data like this, it's apples to apples. And oranges to oranges. So we can still look at the trend line. But they found that only 3% really, truly refused to lean and were not part of a political party. Again, it changes, it fluctuates, but we don't usually find that low. I suppose it's possible. Remember, sampling errors, subgroup sampling errors are higher. So 3 is not that far away from 9 with a subgroup. But typically we're pretty much, low end 8 or 9. We have been as low as 7 once, but high end of anywhere between 12, 13, 14, maybe. But that's what we found consistently over the years. That's how it is. So when you see independents, when there are huge swings among independents, you do need to take it with a grain. Our independents don't swing like that. You guys know that. They do go, Glenn Youngkin was a really big example. Biden had won them by double digits. Very same people who said that were now voting for Youngkin by like 7. So like 15-point swings are possible. But because these people do lean one way or the other, it's not, you're not going to see 30-point swings. You're just not. And if you do, it's usually noise. Not to say the poll will be wrong overall, but something else might balance it out. And in the end, it all works out. But it typically is not the case because there just aren't that many voters who are truly willing or are truly independent that they're willing to swing like that. All right, so let's get into it. The contours of the 2024 political landscape, and we're going to read some and then skip through it for the graphics, are the result of long-standing patterns of partisanship combined with profound demographic changes that have reshaped the United States over the past 3 decades. Many of the factors long associated with voters' partisanship remains firmly in place. For decades, gender, race and ethnicity, and religious affiliation have been important dividing lines in politics. This continues to be the case today. And it's really astonishing. I don't know how much we'll get into by the time we get there, but it is really, really astonishing the difference between the parties and their advantages with people who are godly and ungodly. All right. So do you believe or do you not? Do you have an affiliation or do you not? And this is something I have focused on when we're doing national polling. I have harped on how much Trump, not alone, not Republicans, but Trump alone has improved with people who do not have a religious affiliation. It's huge. It's a big deal because Democrats usually, and you're going to see it here, they got like a 70-point advantage among those who don't have any religious affiliation whatsoever. All right. Yet there also have been profound changes, in some cases as a result of demographic change, in others because of dramatic shifts in partisan allegiances of key groups. The combined effects of change and continuity have left the country just 2 major parties at virtual parity. This doesn't happen in the Pew poll. Gallup, we've seen it. But Pew has consistently found Democratic advantages. Not monstrous, but statistically significant, and consistent. About half of registered voters, 49%, identify as Democrats or lean toward the Democratic Party, while 48% identify as Republicans or lean Republican. In recent decades, neither party has had a sizable advantage, but the Democratic Party has lost the edge it maintained from 2017 to 2021. Explore this further in Chapter 1, which we will not do, but you will see some of it as we go. The bottom line is, that's in bold for a reason. They are among the most Democratic friendly tracker when it comes to partisan identification. I'm not saying they're partisan. I'm saying they routinely find larger advantages for Democrats than other polls like Gallup. Rasmussen is a fixed weight. They do it based on, basically, it's done through research Nielsen does and others do for the survey of consumers, and it gives you the overall electorate, and then obviously the difference in voters by party. They track that, and they'll make adjustments as they see. We are very different. We're on the other, well, we're different than Rasmussen, although we have obviously a friendly relationship. We have a difference of opinion when it comes to partisan weighting by partisan affiliation. People change their minds. And if we waited for party, like I suspect the St. Pete poll did in Florida, if we waited by party, we would never have caught that trend in Florida. Never. And that's not true, just true of recent polls that we've done in Florida. What are you weighting it to? What people said in the last election they were? Well, never. It has never been the same. One subsequent election after the other. Never. Pew Research Center's comprehensive analysis of party identification among registered voters based on hundreds of thousands of interviews conducted over the past 3 decades tracks the change in the country and the parties since 1994. Among the major findings, in bold again, the partisan coalitions are increasingly different. This has been the case for a while now. It's this idea of how do we reconcile our differences? Well, the only way you can call reconciliation successful in Washington, D.C. is if one party capitulates to the others, which is what Republicans have been doing for many years. There is no way to reconcile the differences. One has to lose and one has to win. Their views are so different. One has wholesale abandoned values they once said they held dear, in them. That's why you see some of the big changes that you're seeing. 20 years ago, there were evangelical Democrats. Lots of them. There still are today, but not many. 20 years ago, there were very faithful Democrats of all affiliations. That is not the case today. George W. Bush was considered, the first evangelical president. It was their guy. He didn't win that much of them. He didn't win that big of a share, not compared to Donald Trump. Trump's vote share among evangelicals, 20 points higher. Bush got in the 50s. Trump gets 3/4 more in some areas. Things are changing. Both parties are more racially and ethnically diverse than in the past. Hallelujah. This is not just the People's Pundit saying it anymore. Or toads on Twitter. Why do you have to pump out? You don't have to always pump out BS all rich. Okay. You don't know the difference between identification and registration. You're a toad. However, this has had a far greater impact on the composition of the Democratic Party than the Republican Party. The share of voters who are Hispanic has roughly tripled since the mid-1990s. The share who are Asian has increased 6-fold over the same period. Today, 44% of Democratic and Democratic-leaning voters are Hispanic, Black, Asian, another race, or multiracial, compared with 20% of Republicans and Republican leaners. However, the Democratic Party's advantages among Black and Hispanic voters in particular have narrowed somewhat in recent years. Again, check out Chapter 8 and explore it in detail. Listen, this is the thing. When parties rely heavily Like Republicans, and I straight up call them racist. There are some people in the Republican Party who advocate for winning 68, 70% of the white vote, as if that's possible. And the hell with how much what you just heard. Those who are Hispanic have roughly tripled since the 90s. Those who are Asian, they have increased sixfold. They used to be 2%. Now they are 6. I don't know where they're getting sixfold from, but well, maybe actually, no, they were less in the 90s. Going back to the 90s, I guess it is sixfold. That's right. Hispanics have yet, I say this all the time, they have yet to even flex their political muscles. If there's a major realignment with Hispanics and they vote, it will change the entire map. We will all be sitting Wednesday, Thursday, after the election day, saying, what the hell just happened? Nothing stays the same forever in politics. Political coalitions are ever changing and ever evolving. The only thing you can count on them being consistent to consistently do is consistently change. And when parties rely so heavily, monolithic black support, 2-3 to 1 margins among Hispanics, similar among Asians, or vice versa. Republicans gotta win 60% of the white vote, gotta break 60%. You will, if you're a Republican, understand this. You just heard those statistics from the 90s. They're not changing because whites aren't growing. Hispanics, particularly working Hispanics, are the fastest growing group. If Laura popped in, woo. If you do not appeal to them, you will be exterminated. End of story. End of story. You can't win 60% of the white vote now. Barely. You get right below it if you're lucky depending on what you're believing. Are you believing Pew, this one? Or are you believing the voter validated survey that's done through the co-op with Harvard and others? Do you believe the Edison Research exit polls? Do you believe AP Vocast? Whatever it may be, you can get 60+% of the white no college vote, but the white share of the electorate is shrinking. And they may pop up and down. They may go from 67 to 72, but they will trend down. Not in the long term, in the short and medium term. The trend will be a declining share of the electorate. So that will require Republicans to rely even more heavily on whites, which they have not been able to do because whites are getting more educated. So there really is only one path for them. Now, on the flip side, I'm harping on Republicans, but on the flip side of this, Democrats' decision to abandon white people, that's just true, unless you're part of the ruling class. Democrats' decision to pit Hispanics and black voters against each other, to pit secular Jews against faithful religious Arabs against each other is becoming a problem for them. The problem is when a party relies too damn much on these racial, these racial divisions. Even a modest change, inroads, he's just saying right now that Republicans are making with these voters, a modest increase in support for Donald Trump among black voters. If he really is ballpark tying Joe Biden, he's leading Joe Biden with Hispanics in some polls, even if he's down by 6 or 7 like he is in ours, which is less friendly to him, it's game changing. It could be a disaster for the Electoral coalition that is relying. And by the way, Republicans tend to underpoll with white voters. They do. They tend to perform better than they actually poll with white voters. So if they manage to hold that advantage with white voters and increase their share of the non-white vote, it will be devastating for Democrats. And Democrats made this decision after 2016. Instead of deciding, all right, he took Michigan, he took Wisconsin, he took Pennsylvania, something went wrong here. Maybe we should listen to Tim Ryan. They went another way. And they have basically forsaken the white working class. Now they're at a point, fast forward from 16 to 24 now, 8 years later, they have forsaken all working class people. They are kicking legal Hispanics, citizens of the country, and black voters who have loyally voted for them monolithically for decades. They are kicking them to the curb for new arrivals in the millions that they feel they need to replace domestic voters who are getting more Republican. So they're playing with fire. Education and partisanship. The share of voters with a 4-year bachelor's degree keeps increasing. Again, this is why Republicans, relying so heavily on white voters is a dying proposal. It is a proposal to die as a national political force. It hit 40% in 23, and the gap in partisanship between voters with and without a college degree continues to grow, especially among white voters. More than 6 in 10 white voters who do not have a 4-year degree, 63%, associate with the Republican Party, which is up substantially over the past 15 years. We just talked about the last 8. White college graduates are closely divided. This was not the case in the 90s and early 2000s when they mostly aligned with the Republican Party. And actually, whites with a college degree actually ticked back a little bit to the Republican Party. And again, real quick, as we can look at a place and show how white voters had an impact. Of course, non-whites had a huge impact on this area, but we've shown this graphic before, and it's worth pointing it out again because there are some very wealthy suburbs outside Atlanta. Once upon a time, they were more GOP, but long before Donald Trump ever came on the scene, as you can clearly see here, they began to trend Democrat. Long before he came on the scene. In fact, the candidacy of John McCain was, if you're looking at this and you understand what you're looking at, the candidacy of John McCain hurt Republicans in the suburbs more than any other person going. And you can't blame John McCain 100%. You really have to blame the Bush wing of the party who allowed the financial crisis to happen because they didn't have the spine to do anything about it. And they didn't, even if they wanted to, they didn't have the wisdom to know that this domestic economic policy, this domestic economic bomb was about to go off, and that domestic policy should have been put ahead of the dumbest foreign war in America's history. And now here we are. So let's go back to it real quick. All right, so the contours, did I just scroll back up? I did, sorry. So there you have it. So there's where it's been. And the gender gap by a modest margin. Women voters continue to align with the Democratic Party. That is more narrow, by the way, because you're wondering, how did the GOP close this gap? Well, they're overlaying demographics. All right. It's not just, well, it's not white and it's just men. It's not now. It's women too. And you can see it in this gender gap. The gender gap has closed somewhat. Women are still Democrat, but only by 7 points. That's a considerable change. And even when you go back just 10 years, you could see a major change. While nearly the reverse is true among men, 52% align with the Republican Party, 46% with the Democratic Party. The gender gap is about as wide among married men and women. The gender gap is wider among men and women who have never been married. And this is another kicker. We focused on this before as well. Republicans don't have a problem with women. Republicans don't even have a problem with suburban women. They have a problem with suburban women who are never married and have a college degree. Very specific. Their lack of support for the family is what has led to this, not Donald Trump. You would have gotten this anyway. The only difference is, had the working class, the non-college, not moved so significantly to the Republican Party, then this would be worse for the Republicans. You wouldn't see 49-48 right now. You're only seeing that because of I mean, I don't even want to call it MAGA, like Trumpism, the populist wing of the party, coupled with a record of economic success and foreign policy and safety abroad. As we played that clip, that woman said, and I mean, very clearly, according to Pew's data, that woman has an 85% chance to be a Democrat. And she said, but Trump's all about America. I do trust him to keep me safer. Whoa. I mean, 10 years ago, that would never have happened. And I don't have them labeled. I hope I got this right, but there's one more, two more. Where are we at? 12:42. Damn, man. It's almost time. All right, let's speed this up. Young and old. The divide between young and old is somewhat more democratically oriented than the one before it. Younger voters, 18 to 24, align with the Democratic Party by nearly 2-1. Majorities of older voters in their mid-60s and older align, obviously, with Republicans. This has been changing. However, there have been wide age divided over the last 2 decades. This wasn't always the case. That's very true. There is signs of this changing, but that 18 to 24, even in our polling, that remains the most Democratic. And I keep telling people that huge number of undecideds in our polling. That's why I expected some of this to close. The 18, 20 to 24 often outnumbers the 25 to 29. And when they decide, they will close the polling a little bit for Biden and for Democrats. However, 25 and up to 34 is certainly getting more Republican. Education and family income. Voters without a college degree differ substantially by income in their party identification. I've told you this before. Well, let me read it. And the flip side of this is true as well. Rich voters, Democrats are the party of the rich. However, if a voter does not have a college degree and made that money through the sweat of their brow, they are super Trumpy. Those with upper middle, and upper family incomes tend to align with the GOP. A majority with lower and lower middle income identify as Democrats or lean Democrats. There's no meaningful differences in partisanship among voters with a 4-year bachelor's degree across income categories. Majorities of college graduate voters align with the Democratic Party. Rural voters move toward the GOP. Today, and again, I say this all the time. I'm going to say it again. I'm going to repeat a lot today. Republicans underperform their support in the polls. No, I'm saying this backwards. Well, let me put it this way, just a simple way. Republicans overperform their polling in rural America. You know it. I know it. It's 60-35. It's 58 to 38. It's bull is what it is. Republicans do much better in rural areas than they poll. There have been less change among voters in urban counties who are still mostly Democrat, 60 to 37. You kidding me? Urban areas getting closer to 40%, Republican is a big deal. The suburbs, perennially a political battleground, remain about evenly divided. Well, that doesn't sound right. I thought they were trending Democratic everywhere, forever and ever. Amen. Groups differences among religious groups is a big, big, big deal. This is one of the highlights of this report. All right. These voters mirroring the movement, the population overall, the share of voters are religiously unaffiliated has grown dramatically over the past 15 years. These voters who have long aligned with the Democratic Party are becoming even more Democratic over time. Today, 70% identify as Democrats or lean Democratic. In contrast, Republicans have made gains among several groups of religiously affiliated voters, particularly white Catholics and white evangelical Protestants. White evangelical Protestants now align with the Republican Party by about a 70% margin, 85 to 14. Then why don't they vote like that for Republicans all the time? Because they don't. However, Catholics they just said a perennial battleground group. Catholics used to be a perennial battleground group. Joe Biden was Scranton Joe. I'm an Irish Catholic, a devoted Catholic. What a load of crap. What this report tells us and what it doesn't. In most cases, because overall, folks, this trend was more GOP this year. The hell did that just go? Hold on. This trended more GOP. Pew Research is choosing to highlight the gains Democrats have made, but the overall number is bad news. How could that be if growing shares of the electorate are becoming more Democratic? Well, because that's not entirely the case. Republicans are making inroads with non-whites who are growing, and Republicans are expanding their advantage among groups such as the religiously affiliated, for instance, or the non-college white. Yet as this study shows, the long-term shifts in partisan identification are substantial and say a great deal about how the country and its political parties have changed since the 1990s. The steadily growing alignment between demographics and partisanship reveals an important aspect of steadily growing partisan polarization. Republicans and Democrats do not just hold different beliefs and opinions about major issues. They are much more different racially, ethnically, geographically, and in educational attainment than they used to be. Again, as I said, whether it's Pew or it's Gallup, it's Rasmussen, it's us, it is a little bit of a sad result. Because 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, everyone generally, at least the ones that claim to be mainstream in their party, everyone generally agreed on core things, such as the Bill of Rights. Let's face it, one political party doesn't believe in the first 10 amendments of the Constitution anymore. They don't. I'm sorry. Did everyone listen to Catherine Herridge testify yesterday at the House? When it comes to reporting on foreign policy, security, corruption, the deep state, the intelligence agency, of course, there was no one better than Catherine Herridge. No one more down the line, no more hard-hitting. She did her job and she did it well. Joe Biden couldn't get her sources through the court by bullying her, so they picked up the phone. The Biden administration picked up the phone, called CBS, had her fired, and then they got their hands on her sources by seizing her stuff. Does that sound like they believe in the First Amendment? Nope. What else is part of the First Amendment? The freedom of speech, which is, of course, part of a free press. But can you say whatever you want in this country anymore without that 49% losing their shit? No. And it's not 49%, by the way. It's not. 49% of this country do not believe we should put people in gulags who don't take a vaccine. They don't. Can you post whatever you want on social media? Nope. And I'm not just talking about things that aren't threats. Can you post unpopular opinions that don't threaten anyone on social media? No. Did they or did they not try to establish a vanguard for disinformation? Did they not try to establish a government agency that goes after you for saying things they don't like? Yes, they did. Absolutely. What else is in the First Amendment? The freedom to practice your faith. Well, as you can see right here, they're not even people of faith anymore. That's been going on since the Obama era. We know this trend it's actually been going on before, but it really exacerbated during the Obama administration. We know the deal with that. The fact of the matter is, you can't expect people to understand something like the right to practice your faith if they themselves don't have any. If they're not believers, then why should they care about something like your conscience when it comes to like abortion, for instance? To them, you're just a dumb, ignorant believer who believes in fairy tales. So that's not a legitimate reason to cite your opposition to something or to go before the Supreme Court and talk about it. So the First Amendment is out. The Second Amendment, do we really have to go through this anymore? We don't. I think the state senator from Nebraska who just changed parties said it. We ran the clip the other day. They don't believe in life anymore. They don't believe in the right to keep and bear arms anymore. There's just nobody there. If you do and you're a Democrat, you will not get on a committee. You will not get financial support for your reelection. They will not help you. They don't believe in the Second Amendment. What about the Fourth Amendment, the right protection from unlawful search and seizure? Give me a break. We're not even going to go down that road. Did they care about the Fourth Amendment when they were climbing up telephone poles outside of Trump Tower to spy on a man who did nothing wrong? Absolutely not. Because the truth of the matter is, that's what they've been doing to presidents of all parties for decades. God forbid they get one of their own that goes rogue too. Believe me, they're going to have that tape ready to pull out and handy. Same thing goes for rabble-rousers and disturbers. Disturbances of the peace and of their zen. Martin Luther King, don't you go get that award. Telling you right now. Because we already bugged you and we got you on tape. Nailing the lady up the road. You go and get that award. We're going to go run it to your wife and we're going to play that tape for her. Which they did. They did. Malcolm X, blah, blah, blah. So as you see, this has been going on for a while. It's just now very much out in the open. The 10th Amendment, the 8th Amendment, do we have to go through all of this? My point of why am I doing this? Because I just don't, there is no reconciliation. I don't know what the hell you intend to reconcile. One side's going to lose and one side is going to win. They don't believe in the same things anymore. It's dangerous when you understand the concept of nation. This is a very dangerous thing. When you read Imagine Communities by Benedict Anderson, which eventually, by the way, we're going to do in the book club. After we're done with this stuff, we're going to get a little bit more philosophical. It's an election year, so we're sticking with election-related work, like the emerging Republican majority, the emerging Democratic majority, right, for instance. And, of course, soon we'll have Gavin Wax and Troy Olson's emerging populist majority. All right, so we don't have to, it is 12:54. I may come back to this in a little bit, but it is clear. Let me see. Wait, one quick. Might have been one more that I had to show you here. Hold on. Yes, there's several more I wanted to, but it is Friday and we have the Q&A. This is simply the trend, as you can see. Republicans once upon a time did have an advantage. Throughout the Obama era, Democrats had a much bigger advantage. Throughout the Trump era, when Trump was the head of the party before the 2020 election, it closed somewhat. Republicans did not overtake Democrats, but it got to the point roughly where it is now, where it was very, very tight. And then when Trump won, usually there is a rush to Republicans or to the party that's in power that just won the election, but they didn't conduct the survey right after he took the White House. And of course, even if they did, it's unclear what they would have found because it was never a honeymoon period like every other president has gotten. There wasn't. It was an assassination politically and otherwise period, something we've never seen before. And then it widened because of what? The biggest social bias campaign you have ever seen in your life, probably that has ever been mounted in the history of human civilization and interaction. The massive social bias campaign directed at suburban women. Because, of course, you heard about that before in 2016, and Trump actually won them. So they had 2 years to hammer the suburban woman, and they did. Not just in the media, but in Netflix stand-up comedy shows, in entertainment, in your favorite show. You guys ever watch You? Unbelievable. You couldn't turn on the television. And that was David Brock and some other groups that had put that together, and it was brilliant. Instead of deciding we messed up, we lost Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, instead of deciding maybe those people have legitimate grievances and we should hear them out, no, we're going to use raw power that we have. We're going to cash in our IOUs in the media and entertainment industries, in every industry known possible. Even private sector, if they don't get on board with it, we're going to hurt them. We're going to hurt them bad. It was the biggest push in cognitive bias ever, in any form of cognitive bias, ever. And as you can see, there is one here, though. Check it out. Wait, there we go. Liberals ticked down a little bit. Did they see their high in 2020? Gallup's found the same thing, roughly. AP Votecast had to share the liberal vote at like 30% in 2020. That's, to me, is a little bit high. But 25% is not at all out of the realm of possible. Even 28%, because, again, sampling errors for subgroups are higher. But now we see them ticking down again. Gallup is as well. We very clearly see less liberals in our polling, or people who at least identify as being liberal. And I got to tell you, I got to run this by you guys. At least in the national polling, we want to add a tracker. We want to be the first ones. We already were the first ones to add Republican identification. And the way we do independent or unaffiliated identification is different than other people. We ask people whether or not they lean to one party or the other. Then we also give them a choice that Pew doesn't. So, too. Which is, I really have nothing in common with either party. We have that. But then we also have that they're roughly equal into both parties. What we would like to add to those other two, and the Republican identification, of course, being, are you a more of an America First Republican or are you a traditional Republican? We would like to add a populism gauge. You cannot put it in with an ideology because there are liberal populists. There are conservative populists. There are even moderate populists. And we'll show you when we do this. The only thing we've seen other people do so far is do that. And to me, that's wrong. You want to split up the severity or the weakness of whether or not someone considers themselves a conservative. Are you somewhat conservative? Are you moderately conservative? However you want to word it. Are you very conservative? Same thing, ditto when it comes to being liberal. If you want to do that, that's fine. But throwing populism in with the ideology track is wrong. It's just wrong. There's populism on both sides. So afterwards, I would love, regardless of what they call themselves, to ask a simple question. Do you consider yourself a populist or not? And maybe we'll give them some very general definition. But we really want to gauge whether or not they consider themselves a populist based on the understanding of what a populist is in their own minds. So we don't want to skew them. All right. We want a very pure gauge. So as you can see, one thing, we've talked about this before, black voters roughly stagnant when it comes to, they're up since the Obama era, but stagnant since the 90s. It suggests that they'll return to that vote share or a little bit more. Hispanics were up and now have ticked down a little bit more, but are up since the Bush era. And Asian voters are roughly flat, down 3 points since the 90s. They used to be a battleground group, there's no doubt, but they're not as bad as they were for Republicans back in the 2016, as Trump did do better with Asian voters in 20. He did. That's another thing you don't hear about very much at all. And again, white voters, for people who think that you can squeeze as much as you can out of the white vote, it's just not possible. They were 55-42 in 1994. They're now 56-41. That's it. Because they're getting more educated. And even as no college whites moved more to Republicans, college educated whites became more Democrat. And those who have a 4-year degree are increasing among white and Asian voters, particularly fast, much faster than whites and other non-white, non-Asian voters. All right. So it is what it is. And that's going to be tough for them to do, for Republicans to deal with, unless they take the road they don't want to travel. I'm Scott Peck. The road less traveled. It's the road they don't want to travel. All right, so we're going to take a real quick break. I'm going to play a video, then we'll do a word from our sponsors. And when we come back, we will go over a couple of more things. I think you get the idea here, okay? Now imagine trying to pull this with this trending change in the electorate. Imagine trying to poll it if you use the census as your baseline. Imagine trying to poll the state in the Sun Belt when it is the fastest growing area of the country. The Northeast is dying. The Midwest hanging on by a thread. All of the growth is in the South and the West. And the Sun Belt is stretching across both and the dominant area for growth even in those two regions. Why? Because the Pacific Northwest is not growing that much. It really isn't. Mountain regions are growing, but not as fast as, for instance, Florida or Texas or Georgia or Arizona. Maricopa's been on the top list of fastest growing metro areas, Phoenix, obviously, specifically, for a very long time. So they're not catching up. They're not catching, and they refuse to acknowledge several things that we were just discussing with Pew. All right, let's run this video, not take a break. Let's run a video, and then we'll take a break, come back from it. All right. By the way, don't forget, if you like the videos, like them, share them far and wide. Best place, of course, to follow us. Oh, and subscribe. But the best place to follow us is on Locals, peoplespundit.locals.com. peoplespundit.locals.com. We'll be back in a few. Enjoy the video.
It's a big issue because I just, you want to have someone in there for 4 years. So you're voting that person in. You're not necessarily wanting to vote in the vice president. And from what we've seen of his health just in this term, it's concerning to be putting him up for election again, just on that alone.
Yep.
Raise your hand if you have doubts about whether President Biden would finish his term. Raise your hand if you have doubts about if he's reelected, whether he'd finish his term. All right, so just all right, keep them up just because we got some late votes here. All right, so all but two of you do. All but two of you have some doubts about that.
Major problem. Major problem. All right, let me take 30. When we come back, we'll take an ad from our sponsor. All right, we're back inside the numbers with the People's Pundit. Let's have a word from our sponsor before we get back into this. I guess Laura hasn't been out there grabbing the questions, so I will have to backtrack and go over the tips and ramble rants and all the other stuff in a hot minute. But before we do, I am honest to God shocked that there are not more people talking about this. It's not that far. It just happened a few weeks ago. On Thursday, March 21st, the court ruled that the FDA must delete every social media post addressing the use of ivermectin for treatment or prevention of COVID-19. It's been determined that the FDA lied in their demonization of ivermectin and other effective drugs for the last 4 years, vindicating doctors like Dr. Peter McCullough, who stood strong despite every cancellation campaign waged against him. And by the way, any other drug that didn't cost $2,000 a pill, like remdesivir, that didn't work. But the question so many people are still asking is, how do I get ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine? Most doctors still won't even prescribe it because of what they did. Well, I've got you covered. Keep listening. Every American needs one of these in their home. Americans are waking up and understanding that now more than ever, we need to have these life-saving medications on hand. They aren't just remedies, they're lifelines for the next time, because there will be a next time. And the wellness company's Contagion emergency kit has you covered. The only of its kind, this prescription emergency kit provides you with a carefully selected assortment of effective medications for COVID-19 and other respiratory illnesses. Ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, Z-Pak, and along with a nebulizer, by the way, in this one. So you can rest easy knowing that you have emergency meds on hand, along with a guidebook for safe use, which is really cool, and you absolutely should read it. Backed by research and endorsed by experts like Dr. Peter McCullough and Dr. Harvey Reich, the wellness company's Contagion emergency kit is a must-have. Avoid the chaos, the wait times, and the price of a hospital, and have exactly what you need for as low as the cost of a single doctor's visit. Go to twc.health/ TPP. The link is in the description. It's twc.health/TPP and get your emergency contagion kit right now. One more time. That's twc.health/TPP. Use the code TPP. Save yourself $30 at checkout and get free shipping. Kits are only available in the US of A. Only available in the US of A. And one more time for our friends at Jam and Bean, or one time for our friends at Jam and Bean, just got a new pack from them. Oh my God, hang on. Hold on. Where is that? Be my huckleberry. Oh, there it is. I'm going to show them this, man. And the stew. Give me the stew. And what else we got here? Loaded baked potato. Let's try it. You want to try it with me? Okay. Come on in here. Let's do this. Oh, folks, we're going to do a little unboxing here. Woo woo. Come on in, Laura, because I know you can't resist the loaded. You can't. We just got a new, and by the way, for those who don't know, it's jamandbean.com, jamandbean.com. Use the promo code TPP40 at checkout. This will get you 40% off the initial cost of the subscription, whether it's coffee or whatever else. You know how much I love their gourmet popcorn, and their medium roast is amazing. It's the best medium roast in a K-cup. The only one, really, honestly. The rest are kind of faux. They're fugazis, you know what I'm saying? I just got a new box yesterday with some of their stuff. Oh, and by the way, 40% off the cost of the initial subscription. And when it renews, you're going to get 10% off automatically every month it renews. They have been doing freeze-dried stuff, and I've been telling you about a lot of them. This is Huckleberry. Freeze-dried saltwater taffy Huckleberry. Holy Huckleberry, it's good. All right. My kids loved it. They didn't even know what a huckleberry was. You know, my son was like, what does huckleberry taste like? And I said, taste like huckleberry, you know? And he's like blueberry and raspberry combined. And I'm like, no, it's huckleberry. Because while it does have, he's kind of right about on that path. Huckleberry really is its own kind of flavor. And man, it's good. Oh my God. They melt in your mouth. Love it. And then we got this, which Laura and I are about to try right now. Thank you for the scissor, my love. You ready?
Sorry,
I'll tell you after I open it because I want to eat it. We have something to store it in, right? So it doesn't go. All right. We put them in those storage things we buy on Amazon. And you can get some real cool ones at Home Goods too. But they're storage things because we never like to bag up cereal. Once it's open, it's open. I like to put cereal in storage stuff.
I just like the
Holy lordy. Smell it. It smells like one.
smell good.
Loaded baked potato. What? God, Laura, tell us, give me your verdict. Loaded baked potato. There, because we love, look at her face.
It's weird. It tastes like, you know what I'm saying?
That's a loaded baked potato,
It's
which is weird because it's popcorn.
It is, but it's good.
It's really good.
You could even
taste the
like,
bacon.
and
What
chives
the
and
hell?
sour cream in it.
What? How the hell did they do that?
Hey, that's what I'm talking about.
Everything's natural. Yeah. Oh my Lord.
Oh, I see.
You guys got to give me a
They
second.
actually have chive flakes in this.
I see the flakes of chive.
That's all nice.
Oh, there's bacon. That's bacon. That's bacon. Look, that's a piece of bacon right there.
Oh, really cool.
Oh my God. Yeah, there's a piece right there. I think it's bacon. You ready? Yo, grab a piece of the bacon. It's bacon.
Bacon.
And it's like center cut. Guys, you know the fat center cut? It's like real expensive. They sell them in blocks at the grocery store. That's what that is.
Ooh, good.
It's center cut bacon. Oh my God. This is delicious. Should we save some for the kids?
No.
I don't think so.
They get everything.
Oh my God.
They're not allowed to taste this one.
And listen, the great thing about all their stuff, it's not fattening. It's popcorn. And it's organic. What did we get to? We got the sour cream and chives.
That's my favorite.
No, that's both of our favorites.
No.
I
I
do.
mean, they're all good. Don't get me wrong.
Creamy dill is delicious too.
It is. It is.
Because it's very close. Creamy dill is close.
You don't have to like dill.
But you
If
gotta
don't
like dill.
don't
Yeah.
touch it.
Also, freeze dried Skittles
Mhm.
and freeze dried candy is expensive. It's very expensive.
And
At
this
Jam
is
and
such
Bean,
price.
it is not. It is good. I'm sorry. I gotta have a huckleberry before we start the show again. There's just no way. Look at the size of them, by the way. Look at how. God, it smells so good. I want huckleberry air freshener. I'm not gonna pop a huge one in. I'll take a small one just to be, because I know everybody wants to get back to business here. But oh my god, holy
Wait,
moly!
okay, I'm just
Yeah,
kidding.
go put it in the storage thing because I'll eat the whole damn bag. I will.
You want me to take this?
Yeah, if you could, please. You know what? While Laura and I are chomping on popcorn, we're gonna play another video, one of the last videos. Thank you guys at Jam and Bean. Oh man, that's so good. You guys definitely need to check it out. jamandbean.com. The link is right there on the screen, but it's also in the description of the videos. Use the promo code TPP40. You will not be disappointed. You will not. And by the way, if you guys love coffee and you're medium roast lovers, because I like a medium roast later in the day, like a dark roast in the morning, you can get either freshly roasted beans that you can grind on your own, or you can get K-Cups, depending on whether you're busy or not. I get both. I am both because sometimes, on the weekends I have time. I want freshly ground coffee. If I don't have time, like it's work during the week, then which I work every day anyway, but it's just a little slower on the weekends. But if I don't have time to pop a K-Cup in, All right. So let's play one more video when we come back. Again, jamandbean.com, promo code TPP40. Let's play this other video, and then I'll try to grab some of your questions, and we'll go from there. All right?
What's your biggest reservation about giving another term to President Biden? What's your single biggest reservation?
Yeah, I think he's been absolutely disastrous for the economy.
I agree.
Raise your hand if you think President Trump's policies on the economy would be better for your family personally. Raise your hand. All right, so that is everybody. President
Everybody
Biden argues that his economic record has been very good. Says President Trump's was not as good. What are you keying off of, Sean? Since you had the best smile, and Virginia the second best smile. What are you keying off of to say President Trump's economic policies would be better for you?
I mean, my past performance of my 401k. I know it was post 2020 and everything kind of flipped around, but you can't blame everything on 2020 for forever.
We have areas here in Pennsylvania where it's just at a standstill right now. Like things are supposed to be being built and the interest rates are just way too high for people to invest and start moving around.
And Virginia, just staying with you because Pennsylvania is near and dear to Joe Biden's heart. Are there Biden policies that you would blame for the problem? And if so, what are they?
The interest rate is so high right now, and I know they're trying to
wait. Is it though? Scranton Joe, is it near and dear to his heart? Really? If it was near and dear to his heart, would he have killed the Keystone Pipeline on day one? You know how many jobs he killed when he did that? If it was near and dear to his heart, would he hate the fracking industry? If Pennsylvania was near and dear to his heart, when was the last time he went and spoke to voters like her in Pennsylvania? When was the last time any voter saw Joe Biden in real Pennsylvania? Is it though, Scranton Joe? Is it?
Cut the inflation down, but like if nobody is building, no businesses are really coming to Pennsylvania right now to keep us moving forward.
Even if you're trying to buy a house, because I'm trying to become a first-time home buyer, the prices are so high right now. It's just hard.
Is there anything Joe Biden could do or say between now and the time you vote that would make you feel differently about feeling that his policies would not be as good for your family on the economy? Or are you pretty much decided that Trump's policies would be better for the economy?
I mean, I feel like he doesn't even take accountability for what's going on in the economy. Not even accountability. Like he's in denial that it's happening.
Oh, that's such a big deal. Did we or did we not spend the entire week talking about abortion and inflation, the economy, and all tied to how what it means to the election. Because what was really eye-opening for me was the last few polls talking about trust to handle these issues, and of course, what their top issue was. And we spent this entire time. I mean, we spent 4 hours this week talking and dedicating time to talking about why voters like her don't feel it. And he refuses to acknowledge it. Go to the Harris Biden War Room Twitter account right now. It's nothing but how great everything is. They refuse to acknowledge it. If he even took accountability for it instead of shrinkflation, it's shrinkflation. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. She's 100% correct. We hear this all the time, too, from voters, and they are right. They're right.
The point is Biden needs to hear the people, because when he's talking about the economy doing stellar, he's talking about the stock market. He's not looking at homelessness or joblessness. He's not, to Gigi's point, thinking about how much it costs to go to the grocery
Wow,
store.
Omar.
And he's gaslighting
Wow.
literally everyone in the process.
And Omar, you voted for Joe Biden last time, right?
Yeah.
Good for you, Omar. Honestly, good for Omar. I'm serious. Good for Omar. This is very rare in today's America where people admit a mistake or admit when they were wrong about something. And that is happening when we look at those trust to handle issues, because we looked at that, for both our own polling, the election 2020 public polling project, but also the Epoch Times polling we did. And without a doubt, Trump led, but he did not lead by these numbers. I mean, massive margins and advantages he has on inflation, on the economy. And generally, economy and jobs is always how we worded it. He led by like 7 points, maybe 10 points. There's like massive double-digit leads. Immigration, massive double-digit leads. Now they didn't understand what Joe Biden would do in the border. That requires people to say, I'm changing my mind, because it's not just new voters doing it. They're 10% of the electorate, something like that. It's not just new voters. It's voters who admitted I voted in 2020 and further admitted I voted for Joe Biden. Are there people who are in denial and refuse to admit that they voted for Joe Biden? There is. But that generally speaking, there's more going on here. By the way, all of these clips, I got to give them credit. All of these clips snagged real quick because I was looking for them. I saw one separately from MSNBC, and then I was able to grab them on the following Twitter account. Let me get it and put it up so I can give him a hat tip here. His name, I don't want to butcher his last name. His name is Paul. That's it right there. So hat tip to Paul for clipping all these videos, saving time for me, but also getting to the crux of what I was trying to convey to you guys today. So hat tip to Paul. Thanks, Paul. All right. Hey, Rich, you can tell how much the lawfare against Trump means to the Dems, because when I'm at the gym every day, CNN is playing on a TV in front of me, and they bring on Norm Eason to sneer and gloat. This is their saving grace. You guys got to definitely understand this. This is the Democrats' saving grace. They believed they needed to make Trump less palatable than Biden. Why? When Trump was running for re-election, he thought his record would carry him, and it would have before COVID, before they changed the rules. Trump never needed to do that. He said, here's my record. This is where it's at. Team Biden has come to the conclusion that they cannot use their record, crew, and they had to do this lawfare. There was always the risk of it backfiring, right? But they really felt that 91 indictments, 91 counts, which are, by the way, many have been dismissed in Georgia. They really felt that it was worth the risk because they had no other choice. They cannot run on his economic record, despite what they say. It's not strong. This is not a strong economy. You know it. I know it. Only his most core voters disbelieve it. They live in a different world, many of them. But there are, as you can see from Mark's focus group, there are voters. Those are all, I should have told you this, those are all swing state voters in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. And as you can see, there are normies who voted for Biden, and they admit it, who don't feel it, who don't believe it, and because it's not real, as we explained, and they are going to hold him accountable for that. Joe Biden's only answer to them is, but he's an alleged criminal. He's been charged 91 times. Did you hear a court found him guilty of rape, which is not, of course, that's not true, but you hear it all the time. E. Jean Carroll, the court did not find him guilty of rape. It's a civil friggin' trial, which is stupid anyway when it comes to something like this. They stopped short of doing that or even drawing that conclusion. What else? Everything else they got with him. The documents case, this, that. Oh, and the civil trial. But a New York court found him guilty of fraud, and they're going to take the Trump Tower away from him. And they need to do this because it's part of a pressure camp. It's a part of a social pressure campaign. That's what worked for them in 18. They feel like that's what worked for them in 20. Some of it worked in 22. J6. Well, their problem now is, number one, those voters are being asked to choose between what they're being told is decent and what their pocketbook is telling them and what their family's future may be. And there will be people in the, Philadelphia suburbs who are going to stick with the decency argument because that's who they are. And again, we talk about this stuff a lot on Book Club, a lot more detail about who they are, what could be done to change their minds. Can you change their minds if you're a Republican? The truth is you can't. I was on with Sean Parnell the other day, put on this video of this woman. I don't think I've ever laughed that hard on air in my life. I mean, I had tears in my eyes. This woman is nuts. He's getting Amazon packages delivered to his doorstep. She thinks there's drugs or something in the packages. She takes his mail. It's a federal offense to take somebody's mail. It is a felony, a federal felony. And she takes his mail, fights him for it, basically. He's trying to physically hold it in her hand. He just takes it away, and she falls on the ground. You killed me, she's screaming. It's absolutely, somebody see you guys laughing in the chat. I mean, it's crazy. But crew, I mean, that is their saving grace. That's what they really do hold this in such high regard because that's all they got. That is all they got. All right. Whoa, there's several tips on locals here. Thank you for that. Your comments. So Spinnaker comments on a couple of VP thingies. Ro Khanna calling on RFK Jr. to drop Nicole Shanahan, presumably to pick someone that will hurt Trump. Yeah. It would be a very big story and a huge F up to see a candidate drop a VP nominate. Here's the problem. Ro Khanna is probably working a bit of his double agent here. If they conclude that RFK is going to hurt Biden in key states, they're going to go after him. He can't drop his VP that easily. If you watched, and I don't know, Spinnaker, you did watch the episode on whether or not, there were really two, but one was in more detail about what RFK needed to do for ballot access. Will he even be on the ballot in some of these states? And in some of these states, as you very well know, they require you to make, if you're an independent organization, they require you to announce your vice presidential pick. That paperwork is done. That paperwork is in. It would be a logistical and paperwork nightmare if RFK tried to switch up his VP now. It more likely would result in him getting tossed off the ballot and tied up in court in states he thought maybe he might and could have got on the ballot. So just a disaster. That will not happen. And if it does, then it's further proof. And I was talking to the New York Post about this yesterday. You'll read it when it comes out. It's further proof that RFK's team is not this crack team that everyone was told they would see. This is a team that really has no idea what they're doing. None. I'm sorry. Once Dennis Kucinich was forced out for his former spook daughter-in-law, this was going to go downhill. I mean, this is not someone who knows the ins and outs of the ballot access laws. Forget about in every state, in battleground states alone. Their list of targeted states to get on was incoherent and stupid. It looked like an amateur put it together, and because an amateur did put it together. She takes I don't want to say 800 more words to write policy positions on Twitter. I mean, that's just like a freaking novel. They're novels. It's like, do your job and stop spending time on Twitter advocating for your own policies. Who is running here? Who's running for president? Are you a campaign manager or are you the friggin' candidate? What's it going to be? So in normal circumstances and situations, Spinnaker, I would say, never going to happen. Never going to happen. But this is not a normal situation, so I wouldn't. If it does, it's catastrophic. Cornel West picking a lady who identifies as Muslim, Melina Abdullah. Mark Elias will definitely prevent them on the Michigan and Minnesota ballot. Yes. Okay. If he can get on. Yes. And let's see. Let's get a quick update about Cornel West's efforts here. Give me 1 second. Here we go. Give me a second here. I've had his website up before, checking it out. So you will see what in progress, this, that, the other thing. That's a fancy way of saying I'm not on the ballot yet. All right. So let me get rid of this. Let me pop up this. And let's take a look at Cornell's ballot access. It would have been easier if he would have stayed on the green ballot. He could have gotten that nomination even if Jill Stein, I think, decided to run because the Green Party was looking for a new direction. And Jill Stein is old news. Her big moment was 16 for their party. That was their big moment. And, in 2020, Howie Hawkins was a bit of a disaster. They needed to go in some other direction. Jam and bean. All right. So in progress is yellow. Need electors is dark brown. On the ballot is like that orangey look. All right. So he will be on the ballot in Oregon, Utah, Alaska, and South Carolina. Window's not open yet in Minnesota or Wisconsin, but the process is open in Michigan and he needs electors for it. There will be a whole lot of bullying. I'm telling you, there are people that tend to do this stuff year in and year out. They're available. There are firms that do nothing but gather signatures, by the way, and do this stuff. And they'll be challenged. There's no doubt. But in Michigan right now, he's falling rather short. Jill Stein herself is not on the ballot in... Hold on, wait. So 1 second. We're going to do this again. I'm going to pull this up again, see if there's been any change since the last time we looked at it, which I believe was, Monday? Didn't we look at it on Monday? There does appear to have been a change. She is on the ballot in Michigan. Absolutely is. All right, so let me give you guys that. That has been. No, right, because when we pulled Michigan, we were discussing that. It was Pennsylvania that she was not yet on the ballot, I believe. Right. And Michigan and Wisconsin where she is. Here is, no, I don't want that one. Different. All right, so because we should go back and forth with these maps here. And then you have RFK's ballot access, which, again, I feel is very up in the air and convoluted as to whether or not he will have a major impact in this election. It is not as simple as people think, right? So for RFK, the petitioning is complete in Idaho, Nevada, Utah, Nebraska, North Carolina, and New Hampshire. The process is in progress in a lot of other states, but again, the window for them is not open yet in either Wisconsin or in Minnesota. Michigan, it is. So I'm not sure what on earth he's talking about here. Hold on 1 second. Yeah, the window is only, the reason why is because she's on the ballot already because of prior performance, no doubt. All right. Yeah, that's a good question. They're all good questions. But hey, Rich, what do you think is the most electoral votes Trump can win? And if you had to rank swing states, what is the easiest and hardest for him to win? That's a great question, Thomas, because I guess it depends on what you consider a swing state. All right. And let's go ahead and bring up the Hills Election Center. Whoops, wrong one. Going to predictions. Okay. I do think Minnesota is a swing state. There was a poll out recently showing that it's a 2-point race. That's Survey USA. Both us and Survey USA overstated Biden's win in Minnesota back in 2020. We did not in 2016. They overstated Hillary Clinton's support. We got it right on the money. Both of us overstated Biden's support in 2020 by about 3 points. I think they may have been a little bit more or a little less, but either way, he only won by 7. Minnesota is a tough state to win, but I do think it can be done with the right Republican. Let's just talk, though, about the generally considered swing states. All right. The reason Wisconsin on paper could be argued that this year, even though for the last 2 cycles it was the best of the 3 Rust Belt states for Trump, even though it could be argued this year that it may be the hardest for Trump to win, is because the non-white vote shift, if it's real, isn't going to impact Wisconsin as much as it will Michigan and Pennsylvania. There just aren't as many non-white votes in those states. All right, so there's no Detroit or Philadelphia or Allegheny County or whatever that if Trump does make a significant inroads, say gets 15-20% of the black vote, and by the way, Sean Trendy's right. If Trump really does get this much of the black vote, as polls are suggesting, and he did 20 points, he said, on track. If you look at the polls, he's on track to get 20%. If he gets 20%, and I would agree with that, I just think that it's going to be less, even though our own polling has him at 20% too nationally. I think it's reasonable to say it's more like 15, 16, but it actually could be higher. I'm just saying I'm favoring the low end of that confidence interval or the credibility interval. That's game over. It's game over. I don't care what the other polls say. If he does get nationally close to 20% of the black vote, it is game over. It will mean a few things. It'll mean that he is going to do better with Hispanics, and that is end game for Joe Biden. Forget about Florida. It's off the table. There are 5% of the electorate in Michigan and Pennsylvania, for instance, that are Hispanic. The ones we spoke to and interviewed in Michigan, very much in line with what they said they voted in 2020. Biden only won them by about 10 points or so in Michigan. He won them by 30 in Pennsylvania. And they told us they voted for Biden by about 30 points in 2020. Now it's about even. So that will be crushing in Arizona, in Nevada, if that holds, which I think there's no reason to suspect it will not hold. Wisconsin also has Scandinavians more so than Minnesota. So when you look at, and where are they, by the way? Let's real quick, let's look at the 2020 results on People's Pundit Daily, and I'll show you what I'm talking about here. Because Michigan in the past has been the hardest battleground state for Donald Trump to win in this area. Georgia and Arizona, I mean, if he's winning Pennsylvania, they're going to go to. Oh, and by the way, the non-white vote shift impacts states like Arizona and Georgia. Certainly Hispanics in Arizona and black voters in Georgia. But if we look, first of all, look at Minnesota, and you can see that hunk, right, of the Iron Range that is staying stubbornly Democratic, even though the rest of the Iron Range is going for Trump. Carlton almost went. He was a few hundred votes away. It probably will go this time. You can see this northeastern hook part of the Iron Range. Okay. If you look just to the south of that, right, you have Carlton, which started to go. Just to the south in the east of the Iron Range, you have Bayfield. Well, you have Douglas, you have Bayfield, and you have Ashland. All right. Those are the 3 labor. There's a history of the labor movement there, right? It's, excuse me, there's still 3 Democratic counties. Notice, by the way, Trump's margin here, 44.4 in Douglas. He got 43 almost in Bayfield, and he got 44 in Ashland. Only him and Ron Johnson have been able to put up numbers like that in these 3 counties. Mitt Romney, rhinos, typical Republicans, they're in the low 30s. Excuse me. When an election is decided by, look at this, 20,000 votes, it's a big deal that you're not losing 3,000 net or 2,500 net nationally. You're only losing by less than 1,000. It's a pretty big deal when the net is less than 2,000 votes in Bayfield. It's a big deal when the net is less than 3,000 votes in Douglas, which has about 25,000 votes in it. So these areas are Scandinavian as well, and there are more Finns and Swedes there. Again, I really keep pushing the book club because I'm telling you guys, this is a big deal. In the book club, you would know exactly what I'm talking about. They are more liberal than some of the others, okay? They are, I mean, that's it. I mean, I don't know how else to say it. They're more liberal than some of the others. So Norwegians are much more Republican than their Finn and Swedish counterparts. All right. So that's another reason why Minnesota can be difficult and tough for Republicans to win. That's another big reason right there. But in any event, that's what we have. Let me see real quick. I'm just looking and scanning for something real fast, folks. Bear with me. Trying to get that out there. Okay. Right. So on paper, because Trump is doing better with non-whites and his white margin is staying roughly the same, on paper, Wisconsin, which is polling among his worst. Now Pennsylvania is Biden's leading in the average, but he's leading there because of one Franklin and Marshall poll. Pennsylvania, you can make that argument. Let's play devil's advocate for a second. This is a good question, so I'm spending some time on it. We did a whole episode on which one of these is more Trumpy. Michigan in our polling, and let me just grab that. I'm not going to bring it up yet, but let me go to big data poll. All right. If you look at the head-to-head in Michigan, Trump had about 1 point more of a lead than he did in Pennsylvania. And if you look at some of these areas about where his support was nationally, it did look like there was more support in some areas in Michigan than there, so Michigan, it looked like Michigan would be the easiest this time. And on paper, that is explainable. However, Wisconsin's election integrity is tighter than Michigan and Pennsylvania. So I'm trying to do this. What's the word? I'm trying to do this delicately, but there really is no delicate way to do it. Democrats cheat, folks. They cheat. And Pennsylvania is a shit show. And there's indictments out of Pennsylvania from the FBI. So the tri-state area in general has a major problem. There are just recent indictments in New Jersey by Atlantic City. They cheat. Regardless of what you hear the media say, there's no widespread evidence of cheating. They're called indictments, for crying out loud. They involved congressmen, election judges. Come on, give me a break. And it's going to be more difficult for them to stuff a ballot box in Dane County than it is going to be in Philadelphia. But that being said, Erie County is a good example. That's actually part of Yankee carve-out, and Yankee is a little bit more difficult of a vote for Republicans than non-Yankee. Look, Trump had won Erie. He barely lost it this time, but he did lose it. This does appear like, so if there's going to be a little tick up among non-college, as every poll is showing, that would put Erie back into Trump's category. You have Northampton, which he barely lost. And by the way, look how close they vote to each other. There is that glitch when Caroline Corluccio was running for the state Supreme Court a couple months ago. That glitch in Northampton. Come on. She won Erie. They never vote 15, 16 point differences. Never. In any event, when you're looking at the demographics in Pennsylvania, you're thinking, okay, he's doing better with non-whites. There's a slight tick up among no college with no white voters with no college degree. That would mean Allegheny probably around 42, 43%. Bucks County may be a little bit more difficult if he doesn't improve with whites who have a college degree. You can see he lost it by a little over 4 points, about 4.4. He lost it to Hillary by 4. But he's going to have to make it up somewhere if it goes to 5 or 5.5. Caroline Corluccio lost Bucks by like 8 or 10 or something. It was big. You got to make it up somewhere. And she just also didn't get the turnout there. So Democrats have a huge advantage in early voting in Pennsylvania, one that Republicans aren't doing that much to keep up. So again, there's an argument that you could make for Pennsylvania to be the hardest state. One state where there's getting to be a difficult argument is Michigan. Even though, look, it went for Biden here by about 3 points, just under 3 points. The biggest margin out of the 3 states, the 3 Rust Belt states. Everything else was nail biter close. But in our polling, what we're showing is you take like Saginaw, which he won. Barack Obama won it twice. He won it against Hillary Clinton. Trump did. Saginaw is going back to Donald Trump right now if the election was held today. Just south of it, Genesee, it's going to stay Democratic, but man, it's going to be much closer. Oakland was Biden plus 14. It's barely, Biden barely has an advantage in Oakland statistically, and we oversampled Oakland and Macomb County, which is next to it. Trump won Macomb by 8 last time. It's looking like double digits right now. And he already does well for a Republican in Wayne. He gets 30%. If he gets 34, that's a huge chunk of votes. Biden netted more than his entire statewide margin just out of Wayne County alone. If Trump can get 4 points more in Wayne County, he's going to slice a ton off of that margin just alone. So that's what's driving his polling lead in our polling in Michigan, excuse me. It's not that he's cranking any more votes out of the Upper Peninsula. It's not. It's not that he's cranking more votes out of red Michigan, which is the northern part of the state. He's not. The southwestern part is red too, with the exception of Kalamazoo. Kent County may go back to Donald Trump, but we'll see. Muskegon, very close, probably will go back. But Biden could hold Kent. He could hold Genesee and still lose if Trump does what he looks like he's doing in Macomb, Oakland, and Wayne. There's almost no significant difference there. It's really remarkable. I'm talking about in the rest of the state. It's really remarkable. All of it is coming from those areas. And by the way, Oakland is very educated. So he is doing better with white voters who have a college degree. He was doing better with non-white voters who had a college degree. There's just very few of them in Michigan. And he was doing better with the working class, non-college whites, but that's not, the full story. You do a little bit better with those who do have a college degree, but then you really romp it up with those who don't, whether they're black and white, or not whether, but black and white, Hispanic and white, non-white and white alone. Then your margin in Macomb turns into double digits. Your deficit in Oakland is, 10 or maybe high single digits. And your lead in Monroe, by the way, which is a traditional Republican county where Trump gets 60%, other Republicans don't. He'd be above 60% in Monroe. I think our polling was like 65-35. Why? Because Biden's or 63-35, something like that. Because Biden was losing a few points off of non-college voters that he won in 2020. He had lost them. They had switched to Trump. And that together with Macomb will absolutely wash the lead out of Oakland, or almost wash it out. It depends on the actual margin on Oakland. So on paper, because of this shift, it does look like Michigan is the easiest. And you can make an argument that Wisconsin or PA would be the most difficult of the battleground states for Trump to win. I know. It's crazy. I know. Weird. Okay, what else we got here? Oh, and the other part of that question, Thomas, what do I think the most electoral votes that Trump can win is? This is what I think Trump's ceiling is, and I'm being realistic here. Hold on, let me get a legitimate good puff on this, and then we'll go through the map. And of course, there could always be surprises, but this is what I legitimately think could be Trump's like a really good night. And then I would show you what I think is like if it was a complete and total collapse for Democrats and third parties really got more of their vote than polls expected, I'll show you. All right, ready? All right. Now, can't believe. First, let's do the easy ones. All right. North Carolina's going to Trump. It may be closer than polls suggest, but it's going to Trump. Georgia appears to be going back to Donald Trump, as does Arizona. All right, so let's just give them those. And I'm trying to go from like hardest to easiest, right? Michigan and Nevada voted roughly on par with each other, but if Donald Trump does do better when it comes to non-whites, and that Hispanic trend is truly national, it's not isolated to Texas and Florida, all right, then he will carry Nevada. It's going to happen. He's going to do better with whites than polls suggest, as he always does. It always looks like the white vote is closer in the polls. In our own polling, it was the same thing. We had the same thing, even though we were right. Lombardo was going to win. Laxalt was up by 2. He was losing Washoe County, and his loss was kind of like baked into the numbers. The Laxalt +2, if you go back and retroactively look at it with a hindsight, being 2020, you could see his loss was baked into that poll. He needed to do better than expected in Clark County, and he didn't. He did as expected. It was an improvement for Republicans, but it still nevertheless was as expected. All right, so that's what you have there. So you have Nevada going to Trump, and he's already at 268 electoral votes. All right. Let's say Michigan were right and he takes Michigan. All right. And it's one of the easier lifts for him. Wisconsin tends to poll to the left of its voting result, at 22 being a bit of an outlier, even though, Johnson was leading by like 5 points at one point, and then it got much closer. That happened. They just badgered him. Mandela Barnes had a lot of money and just badgered him with ads, and he didn't fight back until Labor Day. So it was very close. That and the ballot harvesting was incredible. However, it was close because turnout in Trumpy Wisconsin was low compared to turnout in Democratic Wisconsin. We know this. We look at Dane, we can look at Milwaukee, we can look even in their areas. Let's take Brown County, for instance, Green Bay. In their areas, turnout was, he won it, but in their areas, turnout was disproportionately higher than Republican areas. So it was much closer than expected. So those voters are going to vote in 24. They will come out. That's the magic of that Trump has with him. He's a turnout machine organically, even though he shouldn't just rely on that this time. They should also rely on infrastructure. I'm not going to get back into it, but I said this on Twitter before. I say this a lot. Also, how non-whites poll versus how they vote is very different, because even though there's no doubt he's going to do better with non-whites, I think that's conclusive, but I'm not sure he'll do as well as he could do unless there's infrastructure. You don't have get out the vote in those communities. Democrats do. So that's going to be able to shave points off of what he otherwise would have gotten. And unless they match that, or at least begin the process of trying to match it, then he will underperform. He'll do better, but he will underperform. But let's just give him Wisconsin, see how that goes. These 3 states, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, vote varying margins. But for the last 8 presidential elections, they have voted together. All right. Wisconsin bucked the trend. Michigan and Pennsylvania went for Herbert Walker Bush in 1988, but Wisconsin went to Michael Dukakis. All right. So ever since, they voted together. That includes when Trump won in 2016. When Biden won in 2020, they might have been hairline close, but they all voted together. So let's, based on that, give Trump Pennsylvania anyway. And by the way, we wouldn't be talking like there's this swing back to Biden in Pennsylvania if it wasn't for the Franklin and Marshall poll that has Biden up by 10. Nobody believes Joe Biden's going to win Pennsylvania by 10 points. The shine is off Joe Biden, and he only won Pennsylvania by less than 2 points this last time. So the shine is off him now. Trump is actually more popular than him when it comes to favorability. They're both unpopular, but Biden's unfavorable rating is higher. His favorability rating is lower than Donald Trump's. Trump's spread in the RCP aggregate is better than Biden. So now it's like both men are on much more equal footing. And it's like two people a big chunk don't like. Now you got to ask yourself, well, if I don't like them, who did a better job as president? And that's why I was playing some of these focus groups before. All right, so there's 312, and that's generally considered what a month or so ago, that was generally considered Trump's floor. All right, what would need to change? Well, it really depends what Nebraska does. There are a lot of people who think Nebraska will go back to winner take all. That would give Donald Trump that last electoral vote, and Joe Biden would not get the second district, and it would end up being 313 to 325 in this scenario. What if he does outperform? I'm really waiting, like I said Wednesday, for the DRI poll to come out in Maine. They do their quarterly tracking poll. They didn't do the winner for some reason. Maybe they were bi-weekly until the year of the election. I don't know. But now that we are in that year, I do expect their quarterly report to come out for the spring. And I really want to see where they're at. Pan Atlantic came out. There was another poll that came out after it. I just don't trust them. Maine is very difficult. Pan Atlantic very much leans to the left. And yet they had Trump winning the second congressional district by 20 points. And the first was much closer, ergo giving Donald Trump a 6-point lead statewide in the state of Maine. All right. He's not going to win the first, though. So you got to still give Biden the first congressional district. So that is where I'm at right now. What could happen? Minnesota could go too. It's only a 2-point race right now. That would get Trump to 325. That's already an extraordinarily good night for Donald Trump if that were to happen. In the event there is an absolute total catastrophe for Joe Biden, I don't think it's enough for New Hampshire to go. New Hampshire has been trending blue, and its demographics are very difficult for Donald Trump. Just very difficult. It is much more college educated than it used to be. It's a hard lift. If we just, and let's give me both. I need both, though, before I start spitting out numbers. Okay. All right, so here comes New Hampshire. Let me just look at college. Okay. Oh, I wrote college. I mean education. All right, so 58% in New Hampshire do not have a college degree. 48% do, or 42% do. That's according to the Edison Research polls, the Edison Research exit poll. If you look at the Fox News voter analysis, where is education? That's education by gender. I'm just trying to look by college, non-college. Okay. White non-college 55, white college 39, non-white with a college degree is 2. So very much actually even closer than the Edison, frankly, but still a very, very difficult lift. 60 or above is when you're really cooking with fire. If you're a Republican, if you're Trump specifically, 26% in the AP Votecast, 26% at a 4-year degree, 16% at a postgraduate degree, making it 42% with a college. Some college or an associate's degree is 30%, but Donald Trump only won them by 5 points back in 2020. And Joe Biden actually won high school or less by 2 points. So it would be closer given what we're seeing now, but it still would be very, very difficult. So I'm not prepared to even entertain the fact, even on a very good night, Donald Trump takes New Hampshire. Is it possible? Sure. I just think Minnesota would likely go first. I really do. At this point, it's not 16 anymore. And I just want to point out, there is another one on this map that could be shocking if third parties do have an impact. I think it's going to be closer regardless. Unless Joe Biden takes more of the white vote. If Trump's Hispanic numbers are real, and I mean, they're real, it's just a matter of how much. But if they are, then a state like New Mexico could absolutely go. Because New Mexico voted for Biden by a little over 10 points. That was almost entirely due to Joe Biden's margin with Hispanics. Hispanics in New Mexico voted more for Trump than Hispanics did nationally. If that holds, then you're talking about a larger impact in a state like New Mexico than what we see nationally. White voters split 50-50. He would have to go back to winning white voters by roughly the margin he won them against Hillary Clinton in New Mexico, but then also tie Joe Biden with Hispanics or barely lose them. And if he does, then that state could get close. With a third party on the ballot, it could go. But honestly, that would be the doomsday for Joe Biden. This is doomsday scenario for Joe Biden. You could, I mean, let's say he did get New Hampshire. It was shocking. 334. That would be the most. Virginia's going to be hard. I mean, I know it's close, but it would be very, very, very hard. I really don't know that that's in the cards. Virginia has a stubborn hatred for Trump. Obviously, Nova plays a big part in that. The mountain region is Trumpy as hell. The Shenandoah Valley. It's very Trumpy. It's not enough. Normally in a presidential election, it's 15-16% of the vote. When Youngkin was elected, its turnout was so high compared to the other areas of the state. It did increase to 19% of the overall share of the electorate. But again, guys, it's really, really tough. So, I mean, honestly, even in a doomsday scenario, I think that is the most Trump would be able to do. We're in a very, very divided country. Could I be wrong, Tom? Yeah, sure, I could be. I just don't think that I would be. But Cliff, I just want, going over New Mexico, I hope that made sense to you. And this is why I think people are right to say that I'm doing like a 180 on New Mexico from what I said back in 2020. I'm doing that and a 180 on the popular vote because it's not a 180. I said neither are serious, neither are really ever going to happen or be in play, the popular vote or a state like New Mexico, until something dramatically changes. Republicans will not win the popular vote until something dramatically changes. And what dramatically, one of them I always said was the Hispanic vote shifts dramatically. If Trump wins the Hispanic vote, we're talking about a totally different map here. I mean, then all bets are off. But I'm really looking at more like a 55-45 split. And if that's the case, and Trump wins the white vote in New Mexico like he did in 2016, but it's no longer 60-40 in New Mexico. And it wasn't even 60-40 in New Mexico. It was... Let me go back to New Mexico and I will, let me go it's simple for me, just input the state's abbreviation. All right, where are you? That's by men and women. I don't want that. Here we go. Yeah, see, Biden won Hispanics in New Mexico 61-38. Higher share of the Hispanic vote for Trump than he got nationally. If Trump was to do like 55-45, then the state's going to be much closer because African Americans, black voters, they're only 2% of the electorate. That's it. Others, those who are other, are about 10. Biden barely won them. It was 53-44. We would expect, and we see this in the primary vote in Arizona, for instance, Native Americans are shifting away from Biden. Some of those core Democratic Native American voting groups. New Mexico has them too. And that 10% could very well absolutely be a tie or even 52-48 Trump. that happened in 16. The white vote is really the kicker there. That's the X factor. Let's assume the Hispanic vote share is correct in these polls. Well, he did several points higher in New Mexico than he did nationally. Guys, I mean, if he was to split the Hispanic vote in New Mexico, he could make that very, very close or even win it. But again, it is a big if. And white voters may end up being more Biden than they were in 2020, which would offset that because whites are 52% of the electorate in the Fox polls anyway. They were 52%. In the Edison research polls, they were, I don't even know if they did New Mexico in the Edison research. If they did, they didn't publish it. But Hispanics can be, 35, 40% of the vote in that state. So if he does well with them and then does just even marginally better with whites, then he could definitely win it. Let's say he doesn't and he gets to 49% with whites, does remarkably better with Hispanics, and Jill Stein or Cornel West or Robert Kennedy were to pull votes off away from Biden in New Mexico, white votes, because by the way, Jill Stein will be on the ballot in New Mexico. White votes get pulled away from Biden. It's a problem. I know you got to go, so I'm about to wrap it up right now. Okay. Oh God, yeah, I will. I'll text him right now. Okay. Hold on. Good luck today. Don't be nervous. Hey, drive safe. All right. With that in mind, it is time anyway to go. Great questions today. I was headed in that direction anyway. Let me just make sure I get the last on locals real quick. If you did an Arizona poll, it would be interesting to include an abortion questionnaire like you were okay with 3 months, 6 months. I think that Dweezy. What is that? What was Vince Vaughn? Dweezy, right? What do you do? And it would have to be done, Dweej. It would have to be done. Eweezy, that's what Eweezy. You guys don't know what I'm talking about. Be Cool, or it was the second one. Is Be Cool the second one? I think it is. Be Cool's the second one. Oh, they were great. Vince Vaughn and The Rock and Dwayne Johnson. They were just fantastic in that. Yeah, I think that would have to be a done deal. That would have to go on there. I think the Arizona House needs to not put this on the ballot and create a law before November, without a doubt. I mean, this is like one of the things that just absolutely drives me nuts with Republicans. They're just so stupid. Dan, I mean, until I think the race is probably a little bit close. I think Gallego probably has a little bit of a lead right now, but abortion, Kerry Lake is handling correctly, regardless of what you hear these other people say. Cernovich saw my tweet. He quote tweeted it. He's been going through the finances of these pro-life groups. Some of them are well-meaning people. Life Site is a legitimate organization that doesn't take everyone's money and put it in their own pockets, but there are so many who are not, and they could cost Republicans dearly in the Senate and elsewhere, everywhere. All right, so with that in mind, oh right, and Luke, didn't you get my email? Can you check your spam for me, Luke? I sent you back a reply, but I even started it with, I hope this doesn't end in the spam folder, because sometimes it does when I email from that when someone's replying to locals. I think you had a Gmail or something, and they're like repeat offenders with that. Just check your spam though, because I asked you a couple follow-up questions, all right? Either way, maybe I'll just shoot you a text and see if I can't get you. Today is a little bit crazy. It's a little bit hectic. I got to sign off on the accountant for the last thing it's coming up on tax day. Don't forget to do your taxes, folks. Do not forget to do your taxes. I, for one, am not waiting for Monday. I want it done today. There's a whole lot of other stuff going on in my family and stuff like that. So good stuff. Just busy, Yeah, so check back and shoot me a text. If you do get it, just shoot me a text. Let me know it's you. In the meantime, I'll go back in my email and find it again. But I knew that would happen. I had a feeling it would not. And I had a feeling it would end up in your spam folder. All right. So, yeah, Dan, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. It's just that eventually it will be Trump on the ballot. And Lake is a much better candidate. I don't think she's going to stop Trump from doing better with Hispanics. She did remarkably well in Gila and other parts of Pinal County, the eastern part of Maricopa. She did exceedingly well there in Hispanic precincts, and she even outperformed Trump in several of them. So I think at the end of the day, that's going to coalesce. Those two are going to run. They're going to have rallies together, and she's dealing with the abortion issue correctly. All right. Make sure I didn't miss anybody's tag here. And one last look on Rumble. Whoa, sorry about that. I had to hit that's called the monitor button again. I don't think I missed anything. The doctor chat. Yep, I think I got it all. If I missed a Rumble rant or something, I'm sorry about that, but we are way over. Got a boogie here. It's 2:07. All right. Don't forget, if you like the show, like the show. All right, subscribe, whether you're on Rumble, YouTube, Locals, whatever it may be. In fact, you should cross-subscribe. If you're a Rumble watcher, you should go subscribe on the other areas. If you're a YouTube watcher, you should go subscribe on Rumble. Vice versa, everywhere. Getter, if you're watching on Getter, you should definitely go and check out Locals, because that is the best place to follow us. peoplespundit.locals.com. peoplespundit.locals.com. What else am I missing here? If you didn't see my appearance on Sean Parnell on Wednesday, you got to check it out. It was the most hilarious thing. But also, we're talking about FISA and so much other stuff. It's really incredible. I just want to give you a big fat I told you so about the state of Florida. Man, don't ever question me on Florida, man. Don't you ever question my Florida results, ever. Never, ever, ever. If I'm out there, believe me, chances are I'm right and everyone else is wrong. But now, Seltzer, Emerson, they all got it. I think Seltzer's lead for Trump is even bigger than mine. Emerson is carbon copy. It looks like a copy and paste job. I know it's not, but I'm saying that's how consistent it is. St. Pete, Trump +6. Bite me. Stop waiting for party. Party identification is fluid, not static. All right. With that in mind, none but love for all of you. Have a safe weekend. Don't do anything I would not do. All right. This is the People's Pundit, Rich Barris. I'll see you on Monday. Thanks for watching Inside the Numbers. Deuces.